Want help to grow your business? Download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.
Welcome to this episode of Business in the Cloud. In this episode, we're going to be covering how to back up all of your data and have peace of mind that it's all stored safely and securely, and then you're not going to experience any data loss in your business. This is a really important one, not super sexy, but we're going to do our best to make it so. I hope you're buckled up. We're going to get started. So, what's the big problem? Well, the big problem is backups, data, storage, retention, managing it. What happens if a business loses important data? Well, it can be absolutely devastating, and we want to do everything we can to prevent that. Now, if you've ever experienced data loss in your business, maybe even something as small as working on a spreadsheet for 2 or 3 hours and then your computer crashing and losing your work, you'll know what it feels like to lose an important part of your business. Now, multiply that by hundreds or thousands of times over. If you lose a large part of data in your business, well, that could be devastating. Your business might have to stop trading. You might be, liable for legal action or all kinds of horrible things. Now, obviously, prevention is better than a cure. So we want to put some great frameworks in place as a foundation to make sure that, well, backups are taken care of and that you're competent and feeling like you're in control of them as well. Because there's nothing worse than technology feeling like a scary black box. Our whole aim is wanting to make this easier for you and wanting you, the business owner, to feel much more in control of your business. So we're going to be talking about backup, and we're going to be putting in some great frameworks and foundations for you learning how to nail backup in your business. So here's what we're going to cover in this episode. First up, what are the backup basics? What are the basics you need to know? What's the backup lingo and the jargon and the basic things that you need to understand to be able to work out and manage backups for your business? Next up, what the difference is between a sync tool and a backup tool, because there is a difference. And popular tools like Dropbox and like Google Drive, well, quite often they're referred to as backups, but they aren't really. They're really sync tools. We're going to show you what's actually different about them. Next up is how to back up your local computer. So what are the best practices on making sure that any of the data sitting on your local machine is well backed up? Next is backing up your website. What do you do with your website that's sitting on a web host somewhere out there on the interwebs? And then finally, how to back up your cloud apps. So if you're using Google Apps, if you're using Evernote, any of those kind of online apps, maybe even Salesforce.com, how do you keep them backed up and make sure that none of your data goes walkabout? So let's get started and dive right in. We're going to start off with some backup basics, and we're going to go through some of the basics of backup that you need to know and understand as a business owner so you can command and control the backup policies and processes in your business. Now, obviously, it's a good idea to start out with developing a backup policy. This is the way that we do backups. And then if there's certain things you need to do at certain times, well, then you want to make sure that you're actually scheduling those backups as well. So there's 3 key concepts that you need to understand with backups. The first is frequency, the second is retention, and the third is restoration. So frequency relates to the frequency that we're actually performing our backups. Now, that might be daily, that might be weekly, might be monthly, might be quarterly. But the frequency of backups is how often backups are actually performed. And this makes a big difference. If you're using a little hard drive like this and you're just doing manual backups by dragging and dropping data yourself, ask yourself, when was the last time you actually did that? Is it sitting in a drawer somewhere, hiding away? Well, if your backups aren't actually automated, then maybe the frequency isn't really quite where it should be for you. Your frequency needs to be no longer than you are willing to risk data loss for. What I mean by that is if you're only backing up once per day, you need to be happy that in a disaster recovery scenario that you may lose up to a day's worth of data. If you need things to be backed up multiple times a day because you couldn't go without a whole day's worth of data, well then typically backup systems get either more sophisticated and potentially more expensive. But you might say, well, no, you know what, I'm happy to just back up things once a week, or I'm happy to back up things once a month. But keep in mind that, if you're allowing those frequencies to kind of slip a little bit, well, you're entering the risk of data loss and you potentially have to bite a larger bullet. Anyway, that's backup frequency. So it's important for you to understand, well, how often are my backups actually being done and how much data am I willing to lose if something goes wrong with the primary data storage system that I'm working with. So next up, we have retention. How long a backup archives kept on file. So what this means is, let's say you're doing a weekly backup and every week you're getting all of your files and you're having them placed on a hard drive. We're going to keep it really simple for now. Now, if every week you're having this backup done, the number of weeks of backups and changes to those files that are kept on file is called your retention period. So if you have 4 weeks of backups, that would be 1 month of retention. If you have 52 weeks of backups, that would be 1 year of retention. And so each time a weekly backup is made, as each file changes, as new files are added, there are new versions of those files available, potentially, in this example, up to a year, if you've got 52 weeks of weekly backup retention. Now, retention can take up a lot of storage space if you are quite often changing and modifying files. If you've got a lot of files, and especially larger files that are changing on a daily or a weekly basis, well, then the retention of your backups is going to determine just how much data needs to be stored in your backup system, whether that's a local backup, like a little hard drive, or if it's an online cloud backup. So keeping that in mind when you're deciding how long you need to retain your data for is an important factor. Now, finally, we come to restoration. And this is, well, how do we get our data back? Now, there's more complicated terms like recovery time objective, which is, the time you want to get systems back up and running for. But what I want you to focus on is just making sure that you've actually got a retention plan and testing that retention plan as well. Quite often, people will invest money, invest time in getting a backup set up, but never really test out the recovery or the retention. It's very important that you know how to recover the backup and that it's not reliant on a particular staff member in your business who could, disappear or potentially be unavailable when you need to recover the backup. And you need to be careful about IT consultants who have control of your backups who, for example, may, have a problem themselves. And what you don't want is to rely your business and your backup and your data retention on somebody else who might have an oops or an oh crap moment. So you've got to make sure that whoever you're working with, whatever technology you're working with, is rock solid and you're able to easily restore from that backup as well. As well as being able to restore well, you should be testing that on a frequent basis as well, at least quarterly or perhaps even more frequently than that. You want to be making sure that you can actually test restore files, because there's no use having a backup if the first time you need to rely on it, it's actually already, there's a problem with it and for some reason you can't actually get the data back. So let's talk about the difference between sync and backup, because there's lots of popular file synchronization tools that are available right now, and people kind of treat these as a backup, but they're kind of not really. Now, if you remember back a couple of years ago, before the fancy world of Dropbox and Google Drive and Box.net and all these cool tools that allow us to synchronize files and folders between all of our different devices, the way we were transporting files around was either emailing them back and forward, maybe we were connecting to our server in our office via a VPN or remote desktop, or we were putting them on little USB devices. So this is a small USB hard drive. It's probably about $100. It stores a couple of gigabytes. Now, a little device like that, we would use either a USB stick, a little baby one, or a USB hard drive to put our files onto and transport those around. Now, along came Google Drive, and along came Dropbox, and these have been massive consumer successes. You can easily send a link for Dropbox.com to your mom or to your grandma. They can download it, install it, and get up and running without any trouble at all. Now, the challenge for that is a lot of people are treating this file synchronization service like a backup. You've got to remember that with Dropbox, they only retain 30 days worth of changes for each one of your files. Now, you can pay extra and have further retention, but your data is actually still only in one place. It's still really only in Dropbox. And if it's in Dropbox on your computer, or if it's in Dropbox on your second computer, and if it's in Dropbox online, well, the moment that you delete a file from one of the machines, it's automatically going to be deleted from all the other locations. Now, I want to share with you a very important point about the absolute fundamental truth of backups. Your data is only safe if it's in at least 2 to 3 locations at any one time. I'll repeat that because it's important. Your data is only safe if it's in at least 2 to 3 locations at any one time. Now, what that means is that if you've got data on your computer and you've got data on Dropbox Online as well, that's excellent. And that's why there's a bit of a misconception around Dropbox being a backup tool rather than a sync tool. You've got to remember that if there's a problem with Dropbox's service, well, you've got the files there on your computer, but what if you delete something and then accidentally it's automatically synchronized and deleted it from Dropbox Online as well? Dropbox isn't really actually taking a backup if there's not a backup of the Dropbox data. So it's a good idea to have an extra layer of protection. Remember that primarily Dropbox is a synchronization tool. Also remember that Dropbox on your computer and Dropbox Online, if you, for instance, corrupt one of your files on your local machine and that synchronizes to Dropbox, if for some reason Dropbox's file restore fails, well, then it might again be one file in one location and not really spread enough correctly. However, if you have some of your files on your computer, they're synchronized up to Dropbox, so you've got a nice safe sync tool where you've got your files in two locations, and then you add a local backup as well.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.